What's going on YouTube? It's Teej back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Cleveland Browns in our off-season checklist series. Let's jump into it. Now, before we get started, happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Hopefully you get to enjoy it in just the way you would like to. Obviously, that means a little bit different for each and every person, but also I am keeping my eye on my phone. Obviously, when talking about the Browns, there is a lot of minute-by-minute analysis I can do with this squad. I almost wish you could just live stream and stick with me throughout the day. But for right now, I'm going to try to get this out, and it might come out a little earlier, maybe ahead of the 2:30 mark. I normally post it just so that way this video can see the daylight before it becomes irrelevant. So the Browns coming off an 8-9 season, good number of draft picks, solid draft cap, cap space right now. A lot of that comes from replacing or cutting J.C. Treader. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But let's just start with Mark Oop, the guy on your screen. Loved that adding. And in the original context, I said, okay, this guy can play within this system. He can be a guy more so than Odell, get to this spot in X amount of steps. Baker will get the ball there. I was like, okay, that's a really solid start. Then at 13, you add a Garrett Wilson, a true separator who can win at all levels, or maybe you're looking for some extra size to go with Donovan Peoples-Jones. Let's get a Drake London, a true red zone target, where I think DPJ can do that, but he's more of this really tall, fast, vertical field stretcher. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I like where this team is trying to put on the table for Baker Mayfield. And then, that leads us into our second point. The note last night, I'm ready for the 30 for 30 to come out, and as I get a ESPN notification, not about Deshaun Watson. So again, I'm trying to keep tabs on this, but Deshaun Watson obviously is an upgrade. So good on Cleveland for jumping into this race and not saying, hey, well, we took Baker number one. He's our guy. Like, the distrust and the hesitancy to move forward with him long term was evident. And I think Baker cost himself a lot of money trying to play his way into a contract when he was playing hurt. Those two things don't often go together. So with that note, it feels like he's on his way out one way or another. So for me, Cleveland, do any and everything possible to get Deshaun Watson. Overpay if you have to for a 25, going to be 26-year-old franchise level quarterback we've already seen played as a top 5 player at that position. And you have the roster in place. That's the other side of this, and we'll talk about if they don't get Deshaun Watson, what I think they might be able to do. When you have that type of roster in place, obviously you want to hold on to draft capital because, players are going to ask for new contracts. They're going to want new money. You're going to have to find ways to get cheaper elsewhere. But at this point, 1 year Cleveland. You've been bad for so long. And part of the emotion that goes into it is, well, Baker has been stable-ish. If you want to call it stable, it's obviously been really up and down. But he stopped the run of names tacked onto that, infamous Browns jersey where it's all the QBs of the last, since they returned to the league. Baker put an end to that. But if you take away that emotional element, he's clearly not been a top 10 quarterback for a majority of his tenure. He's had some moments, he's had some flashes, had some stretches, in year 1 of Kevin Stefanski's offense, or like week 4 onward or week 6 onward or something like that. He played really, really good football. But it hasn't been there in totality. So that's where I think if you can get Deshaun Watson, who is going to be good, you've seen him be good for more than just 1 year at a time, it hasn't been good a year, bad a year like Baker, I think you do anything and everything you can in your power to make that happen. Additionally, he's in his mid-20s, so jump all over this. Now let's talk about some of the possibilities outside of Deshaun Watson. Let's say Watson decides, I want to become a New Orleans Saint. And I think that would be, one, ironic because of what Deshaun Watson's going through right now, and to play for the Saints, that's a little funny. Not that what he did is funny, or the Carolina Panthers. To me, they make the most sense. The Falcons, I don't know how they shoehorned themselves into it, probably just to move the asking price up for New Orleans and for Carolina, which makes sense. What are the other options for Cleveland? So I've heard a lot of Indy having interest in Baker Mayfield. Let's just say that's where he goes, and you get a similar package to what you got with Sam Darnold, right? 2, 4, and 6. Okay. Then I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think that's certainly in play. It's kind of questionable why he hasn't gone to Indianapolis yet. That's been speculated, especially with the picks that Washington gave Indianapolis. I was like, okay, that's just Jimmy Garoppolo ammunition. This makes a ton of sense. Hasn't happened yet. Fascinating. There's been rumors of the Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston interest as well for Indy. Okay. What if Baker is ultimately what Indy ends up with? What does that mean for Cleveland? Well, Jimmy Garoppolo is an option. We talked about that. That's not necessarily an upgrade. It's realistically a percentage point of difference between one or the other in either direction. Like, there's not a whole lot that separates it. When you have, middle of the season Jimmy Garoppolo from this past year, it's probably better than what we saw from middle of the season Baker Mayfield. But you go back 2 seasons ago, end of the year Baker was a whole lot better than end of the year Jimmy. So they trade off. But if you take their mean and their average, they're in and around the same neighborhood. What I think gets interesting is Kirk Cousins. Now, I think a lot of people are going to rule this out. He does have a no trade clause, so this does make this a little complicated. But keep in mind who the head coach of the Cleveland Browns is. His former offensive coordinator, former quarterback coach, who used to work with Minnesota with a lot of different positions. So he's familiar with Kirk. And with the extension taking Cousins' cap hit down this year and adding on a second year, that almost might find it more lucrative or more attractive for a team like Cleveland, who, again, has the pieces in place. I don't think Kirk Cousins is great for Minnesota because the amount of money he makes prohibits that roster from getting better where they are now. Right now, Cleveland's got the roster. And, they've done such a great job managing their cap to where they don't mind trading a fifth for an Amari Cooper. They have the flexibility to be able to do that. So I think a potential trade could be in the works for Kirk Cousins if Cleveland does not land Deshaun Watson. I know the no trade clause makes it interesting. Not a lot of people are crazy about Kirk Cousins. I totally get that. But given the situation the Browns have right now, already having Amari Cooper, and plus if you got Cousins, maybe it forced you to give up pick number 13, but it's a whole hell of a lot less draft capital you have to give up to get Deshaun Watson. So maybe your second rounder adding another complimentary wide receiver. Maybe you're finding that next edge to rotate on and off with Chase Winovich, who, by the way, that's not on here in this trade. I like that trade for the Browns. I think Winovich, one, really solid DPR, or could potentially be the starter opposite of Myles Garrett if you had to. So really like that move. Plus Mac Wilson wasn't really seeing the field a whole lot for Cleveland, and it wasn't giving you a whole lot of production. So I think they can get better at that position anyways. They re-sign Anthony Walker. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. But I think Kirk Cousins is in play here. All that to kind of come down to this. I think it's Deshaun Watson. I think Kirk Cousins is totally in play if he's willing to waive his no trade clause. If not that, Jimmy Garoppolo feels like the most inevitable option for the Browns if they do decide to move on from Baker, which, with that note, you got to at this point. Like, it's clear he doesn't want to be there. It's really obvious that Cleveland does not view him in a very positive light. You probably heard it 1,000 times with the Chris Mortensen report, wanting a grown-up. I know this isn't the same GM, the same head coach that drafted him, but ownership pieces and those wigs were still there. I don't know if this person was or was not, but that's not just saying, Baker, we need someone who fits our offense better. We're looking to stretch the field more. This person's just an upgrade, or we need to get younger, reset our timetable. That is an attack on not only dude's character, but his maturity status. Like, one, that's kind of an immature move in and of itself, but two, that is like green light, this guy's gone. Like, that to me is like football, pro sports talk. If you're talking about a dude's maturity and saying you want a man in that position, yeah, that other person that they're referring to not being a man is on his way out. So Baker's probably gone. I think Indianapolis is a really interesting fit. I'd like to see Frank Reich work his potential magic. It didn't come to full fruition with Wentz. Maybe he can resurrect Baker Mayfield a little bit more. And plus, we've seen 2 good seasons out of Baker, so there might be twice as much worth investing in compared to Wentz. So that's my kind of Deshaun Watson quarterback spiel for the Cleveland Browns. Again, I am monitoring this as close as I can get. I think Watson is absolutely the play that Cleveland should be making here, because if so, like the final note says, this team is legit. And Von Miller just signed with the Bills, and the Chargers are out here signing J.C. Jackson, trading for Khalil Mack. Chandler Jones now plays for Vegas, and the Chiefs have the best quarterback in the league, over a 3-year sample size. The AFC is unbelievably loaded, so I'm not saying Cleveland gets Deshaun Watson. They're the best team in the conference. But damn if it's not a conversation amongst those 4, and then throw in Cleveland and maybe a resurgent Baltimore. There's just so many different teams you could throw into that category. So for Cleveland, if you want to have a legitimate Super Bowl shot, Deshaun Watson's your guy. Kirk Cousins makes you interesting. And then, Jimmy Garoppolo is like, fine. You're basically keeping the ship afloat, but you're not going to really get that far, I think, against Burrow, against Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about the draft. And obviously, this is another complicated part of it. Oh, my fault. Final free agency point. You got to find a J.C. Treader replacement. That might be someone that you get in the draft. So you need to find a new center. Makes sense. Day one, if they have this pick, so let's say maybe they do get Cousins, but don't have to give up 13, or they're getting a pick back in the deal, or they don't get Deshaun Watson and they're landing Jimmy Garoppolo and they're forfeiting mid-round picks. Okay. At 13, I think wide receiver makes a ton of sense, especially if it's a Jimmy Garoppolo. Add your Garrett Wilson. Add your Drake London, Treylon Burks if you really like him. Jameson Williams is an interesting player there at 13. Add the wide receiver you think that you're missing, the body type, the way they win, whatever you think, if you're Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, whatever you think you're missing, go wide receiver there. If not, and I say this, let's say Garrett Wilson's off the board at 8 to Atlanta, Drake London's taken at 10 by New York, Washington goes wide receiver at 11. You're not crazy about Jameson Williams at 13 or Treylon Burks at 13. Okay, then go edge. George Karlaftis, I think, is an interesting fit. David Ajabo could be a nice fit in that 4-3. Jermaine Johnson has been rising up boards. He might not even be there at 13, but if he is, that is a really interesting player to add to that defense. So focus on wide receiver, then I think you pivot to edge if, a lot of the top guys are gone in this run, basically from, pick 8 to 11 to 12. Day 2. So again, obviously a lot of this is in motion and in play. Maybe they're giving up 13 for Cousins. They only have day 2. So in that case, go get a George Pickens is really interesting. Your third rounder, maybe David Bell's an okay value. Calvin Austin could be a fine day 3 pick, or round 3 pick. Sky Moore maybe could be in play if you don't have that first round pick and allow that to go wide receiver. In the case that they do go wide receiver round 1, I think round 2, Cam Thomas I think is a really solid add. Maybe we're going to beef up the interior and go to Marvin Leal, who could play both at that 4-3 end spot, which he played a whole lot of at Texas A&M this past year. I think he's better suited as a 3 tech and a 4-3. So maybe you're kicking him inside. He's a part of that rotation in the middle where the Browns definitely can get better. So I think there's some options there. And then after the plus symbol here, IOL or inside linebacker, that's kind of what I'm focusing on. Round 3 in a perfect world, if the Browns have all these picks, wide receiver, edge, and then with the third rounder, you're going to find that J.C. Treader replacement. Maybe a Cole Strange is a project that you're working on, and maybe you feel confident that he could play day 1. There's also an awesome linebacker class. So in round 3, you might have a Brian Asamoah, you might have a Damone Clark, you might have a Chad Muma fall to you. Pounce on that to take advantage of where the class strengths are, and that's kind of my final point for day 3. Attack those areas with this draft is special because there's going to be good value. Think about the edge class last year, and it wasn't great, but Cam Sample was a 4th round pick, and he was a quality rotation player for a team that made the Super Bowl. So finding some of those players that on day 3 maybe aren't world beaters, aren't the ultimate difference in your defense, but can plug in and be a DPR or rotational outside corner, or where I think there's really good strength in this class is there's some project offensive linemen. I think the Browns have one with Bill Callahan, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, done a great job of drafting and developing talent. And I think this is another place and another time, day 3 of the draft, where they can do that. But if not there, linebacker again, I think there's a ton of value that will carry over into day 3 of the draft, and at edge. Those 2 spots, there are a ton of good athletes and a lot of good players that are going to get pushed down the board just because there is a lot of them. That being said, I think that's more applicable for the edge spot because I could see teams, going on a run on, round 2, maybe round 3, and then a little bit of a drought. Then the remainders are there, in day 3. Edge, everybody needs a couple of those, so I could see that maybe not being as big of a pool to pick from once you get to day 3 of the draft, but I still think there's going to be some solid value there. And again, final notes. This team's roster's there. They've done a great job managing the cap so they can make a move for it. Amari Cooper, they have draft picks. They have done so much right when it comes to managing a team. I think they have the right head coach for them as well. Now it's about finding the right quarterback because it's the most important position in football. Baker Mayfield's been too up and down. The way he goes, it's, really solid rookie year, bad second, great third year, year 1 with Stefanski, disappointing 4th year. So, the ups and downs would lead you to think year 5 is going to be pretty stellar. But that said, it looks like they're going in a different direction there. So if you can get a Watson, this team is serious contenders and a far better AFC compared to the NFC. If they get a Kirk Cousins, they might be the best team in the AFC North. It's pretty close then between them and Baltimore. I think I might still go Baltimore, depending on what Cleveland can do with the wide receiver room. And if it's Jimmy Garoppolo, you're basically keeping it afloat, and you need to attack the absolute mess out of wide receiver rooms. Try to sign an Allen Robinson, then go Garrett Wilson at 13. Just put an egregious amount of talent around him and hope that he doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. And hopefully the Kevin Stefanski offense can minimize the harm that Jimmy Garoppolo tends to have a ability to have. So those are some of my Cleveland Brown thoughts. I do apologize. I rambled a lot of different points. There's just a lot of different directions this team could go right now. And because of that, it's tough to talk about what they could do in the draft and what they should do in free agency because I don't know what this team's going to look like in 12 hours when I'm kind of anticipating a decision will be made by Deshaun Watson. So If I'm Watson, honestly, I'm going to Cleveland outside of the fact that Cleveland is not a place I want to live, but I think Carolina is one of the worst places to find yourself if you're a quarterback right now. Malik and Willis and Deshaun Watson, I really don't want to see either one of them end up there just as a fan of football. New Orleans, I don't know how they make that work cap-wise. What other sacrifices might be there? Apparently, Teron Armstead might come to New Orleans if Watson decides to go to play for the Saints. I don't know how, but okay, fine. That would be a good landing spot. I'll give you that one. That's why if I had to pick, New Orleans or Cleveland are probably the picks that I would go with if I was Watson. And I think Atlanta's just trying to drive up the price, so I'm not really considering them here. But I'd go Cleveland because I like the head coach, like the pieces around them, and I think that they have a little bit more longevity and projection to it than New Orleans does, and I think that would make the difference for me. But hey, one, I don't have 22 civil cases against me, so that's good. I'm a little bit better of an off-the-field person. Maybe you could say Deshaun Watson is. But I also don't have that decision. Give me your thoughts. What do you think Cleveland and Deshaun Watson will do today? Is he going to be the next quarterback of the Browns? Do you think Deshaun Watson plays elsewhere? What do you think the Cleveland Browns do if they don't land Deshaun Watson? Love to have your thoughts down in the comment section. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's long, rambling video. And if you did, hit that like button. And if you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. It really would help me and my channel out a ton. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Enjoy March Madness. That time of the year is finally here. I'm so stoked for all the basketball this weekend. But that's going to do it for me. Until next time, my name is Teej, and I'm signing off.